Welcome this Thursday morning. It's Andrew Fox here from Trust Systems, and welcome to our Learn and Level Up webinar. As you know, hopefully you've been tuned into the series, and we've been focusing on network and the new sort of distributed network technologies such as SD-WAN and SaaS to look at that hybrid working environment to ensure everything is remaining secure and safe. And obviously accessible. Well, today we sort of take that a little bit further. Today we're going to be talking about SaaS and why is that so important. We're going to be joined by obviously myself, but Chris Wortt, who's a specialist at ThousandEyes, who from Cisco. Many of you may know ThousandEyes was acquired a little while ago by Cisco, and ultimately they are adding a sort of enhanced observability and monitoring capability across the network infrastructure and architecture and distributed networks. And today we're joined by Chris, who's going to talk us through that proposition. And I'm just going to sort of really this morning, just before we hand over to Chris, Chris is joining us on a pre-recorded session due to sort of time zones restrictions we've got this morning with his location. So I'm going to be handing over to a presentation from him. But before I do that, I just really want to sort of talk about why SaaS is so important. And we all know what SaaS is, but why is it important from a network perspective, architecture, and particularly around observability and monitoring. So ThousandEyes, as we mentioned, it does provide that true sort of end-to-end visibility for all your endpoints, and those endpoints and across all your application stack becomes a very different beast to where it was many years ago, when we had perhaps a more walled garden sort of network environment where we had dedicated networks under sort of governance under MPLS. Our data centers were within our control, within our sort of maybe on-prem, maybe as part of that MPLS network. We were linking in. It was all very secure, already dedicated. I think we all have to recognize now in today's marketplace, and particularly with a lot of our application stack moving up into the cloud, being delivered as a SaaS model, that network that we're using and those applications that we're using are no longer in that walled garden that we control, and therefore our ability to monitor those applications, ability to get that full observability across the network piece becomes a challenge with some of the more traditional network monitoring tools that many ISPs and many organizations have used for years. So what we're trying to do here is try and sort of look at, well, what's evolving from a networking perspective, what's evolving from an application stack perspective, and therefore how does the network monitoring need to evolve alongside that to ensure that you have, as an organization, the right network and the right support to support that hybrid workforce, to give you that ability to resolve issues that your sites and your people are experiencing quickly, and that's across networks that aren't necessarily within your control, within your ISP control, as a traditional MPLS network. So it's about enabling your people, resolving and identifying issues across that network, across that sort of that complete path, which is being internet facing, web-based applications. And to give you that full end-to-end network connectivity, visibility from Wi-Fi access points through the ISP all the way out to that SaaS, the SaaS cloud models. So hopefully that gives you a sense of scene. Without further ado, I'm going to sort of introduce Chris and hand over to him for his version of his run through of network availability and monitoring from ThousandEyes.
To set the scene a little bit, let's talk about the new enterprise reality. And over the last couple of years, I'm sure many of you will understand that this has definitely been very, very relevant. Hybrid working, with workers spending more and more days working from home every month. Almost 60% increase that we've seen over the last couple of years. Modern app architectures, so that spending in public cloud and using AWS, using Google Cloud, using Azure, that spending increase has been absolutely phenomenal during the course of 2021. 2021 over 2020 has seen a $20 billion increase in spending for SaaS. And we are seeing increasingly more and more software-defined type technologies like SD-WAN and SASE in excess of 30% with a spend over there in 2020. So the reality is enterprise environments, enterprise infrastructure is definitely changing, which in a way kind of creates a perfect storm. And that perfect storm manifests itself with effectively cloud becoming the new data center for the enterprise, SaaS becoming the new application stack, and home, as I'm sure many of us are very familiar with over the last two years or so, becoming the new office, right? All of that underpinned by the internet, because each and every one of those clouds and SaaS and home environments are relying on the internet as the new network. So with that in mind, I want to jump into some of the challenges that enterprises are seeing. So if we look at cloud, biggest challenge there for a cloud or an enterprise adopting more cloud and using more cloud is the fact that they are now blind because of the internet between them and those assets. How are they going to observe, and how are they going to see and visualize that distributed landscape? How will they see the infrastructure and the assets that they don't control? How are they performing to ensure that they're getting, good connection and good digital user experience? SaaS being the new application stack, again, that's an internet dependent service, and our enterprise customers are coming to us with real struggles on how they're improving or how even to maintain user experience for those SaaS applications, primarily because their traditional instrumentation doesn't work. So those typical network performance monitoring platforms simply don't give them the visibility across internet. Home, we all know, increasingly is the new office. Like you, I am, spending the majority of my time now working from my home office. That creates a bunch of challenges, again, because of the internet dependencies. And how are those IT teams at our employers and those enterprises that have got large communities of home workers, how are they making sure that those workers are getting the right digital experiences for the applications and services that are important to them? And of course, internet with a new network, the reality is everything is underpinned, but that internet network is actually a public network. It's best effort, and it has no SLA, and it's constantly changing. So if you consider that for our partners, for our customers, that is a real challenge. So let's press on to the next slide and talk about digital experience. So we talked about home workers, we've talked about remote sites, we're talking about using internet, and in principle the whole thing seems very simple, right? We just connect, we connect to our web services, we connect to our SaaS services, and everything's good, right? Well, maybe not quite that simple. So once we initiate that session to the resource that's important to us, whether it's SaaS, whether it's a workload in a cloud provider or any other internet dependent service, there's a myriad of different topologies that we're going to need to traverse. And between you as an enterprise and your employees and the services they're looking for, a whole bunch of stuff to consider. Is the VPN performing? Are the local ISPs actually working? And on top of that, then what about the transit ISPs that are getting us into the cloud and the SaaS providers? What does that SaaS on-ramp look like? Are we connecting to cloud providers directly? There's a myriad of challenges there. And the purpose of today is to really talk about how ThousandEyes removes the blind spot on that digital supply chain, specific in this case to SaaS. So let's concentrate on SaaS just for a second. So many of you as our partners will be probably familiar with your customers retiring some of the workloads like expense systems, and maybe retiring things like HR systems, and perhaps moving to Concur and Workday, increasingly using things like Salesforce.com, other applications for CRM and ERP, even things like Microsoft 365 and unified communications like WebEx, of course, right? So let's understand that all SaaS applications are not equal. Where are they hosted? Are they hosted in public and private cloud? That has a bearing on that connection. How is it delivered? Is it delivered via, live servers as well as CDN. What do those CDN providers look like? Where are they? How are they delivering the content? How are your APIs performing in terms of maybe connections in there? And how do I reach that application? You know, is my provider backhauling my data to a data center before breaking out onto internet? Is it split tunnel? How's it working? So lots of considerations to think in terms of, you know, how we're getting to those SaaS applications. So let's just drill into, you know, probably one of the most popular and certainly one of the strongest use cases for us here at ThousandEyes, which is Microsoft 365. You know, gone are the days when people were using predominantly Exchange. It's increasingly 365. 365 as a suite has multiple applications within it, and they're all SaaS applications. They're all addressed by getting into the Microsoft cloud, right? So we have reliances on SharePoint. We have reliances on Outlook, and we have reliances on things like Word Online, to name but a few. Okay, so hopefully you're now getting a flavor that, you know, these are not assets that are owned and operated on the customer network. These are now SaaS services delivered across internet. And then let's just look at what different SaaS services like. So within the 365, I've picked Outlook and SharePoint here, right? So if we look at the top four boxes, availability, really good. Actually, all those services are up. Outlook Web Access is great. SharePoint, all good, 99+%. OneNote, 99+%. Word Online, 99+%. Response times, however, is a very different story, and I'll illustrate why that is in just a moment. But we can see on the left-hand side, the response time for Outlook Exchange, as it's labeled here, but the response times for Outlook are generally pretty good. It's generally green across most of the globe, right? However, customer that has a reliance on SharePoint, they're seeing that their users out in Latin America, out in Asia and Asia Pacific are really not experiencing such good response time. So by default, we can see by the very nature of those red dots, those users looking to use SharePoint are going to be having pretty bad digital experience. So why is that? Well, Outlook as a SaaS service has an awful lot of content dependent on CDN. So a lot of the stuff is cached around the world, which means that actually the load on the servers is very lightweight because an awful lot of the content's coming from CDN providers, typically much closer to the user than maybe even the server is, right? So that means page load times are quick, that means response times are quick, and that means that the user is getting a pretty good digital experience. If we contrast and compare that to SharePoint, for example, SharePoint has almost nothing cached and only one or two data centers. So if you're not close to those data centers, we're going to start seeing significant drop in user experience. And, you know, on that previous slide, you saw that, you know, most of Latin America, Asia Pac and Africa were red. So we pretty much can draw the conclusion that the SharePoint servers in that case are not in those regions, right? So that's got to be a consideration. You know, there is no steady state in the cloud. So once you're looking for heavy workloads to come across, you know, fairly long distance, multiple transit ISPs, you're going to start looking at seeing significant decline in digital user experience. So just to round up what that SaaS delivery architecture looks like, right? I'm not going to drill into all of this, but, you know, as I mentioned, Outlook in that comparison earlier, you know, a good amount of that content is cached on edge servers. So that means the response time to the users is very good. With SharePoint, right, they use this kind of Microsoft Cafe CDN, but all the content comes from the origin server. So they don't have anything cached, which is why the page loads, the further away you get from the servers, become much, much longer, right? Salesforce, WebEx, Box, G Suite, Slack, Jira, all these SaaS services all kind of get delivered in different ways, from private data centers to public clouds to different CDN providers, etc., etc. So, you know, just bear that in mind. I said I wasn't going to go into detail, but hopefully that gives you a flavor that, you know, just because it's SaaS doesn't mean it's all delivered the same way.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for that insight. I think it's really useful and really valuable for you to allow us to share that video this morning. And as we move through the level up and learn session, hopefully it gives people an opportunity to go back to and listen to that content. And certainly, as I was listening to Chris there, it really does, give us a good understanding as to sort of why network monitoring is becoming more important in this new hybrid, digital first, SaaS first approach for delivering applications out to our end users. And certainly as that landscape or that sort of network environment is changing, it means that there's a lot of gotchas out there, and not everything is equal when it comes to connectivity, when it comes to networks, and particularly when you're looking outside of your traditional walled garden, outside of your own traditional perimeter of a network, taking a more internet first approach to access technologies. So let's just dive into we've got just a couple of slides that we just want to demonstrate a bit of a demo of the of ThousandEyes and the power of the full stack of observability. And we just want to walk you through a sort of a typical scenario of how the monitoring tool can effectively aid and speed up resolution time of any issues or known issues that your end users are experiencing. So let's take a typical example of a cloud first SaaS application. Microsoft 365. A lot of us use it. It's becoming the sort of de facto communication tool, and particularly some of the integrations with Teams. But let's have a look at Microsoft Office 365 in the first instance. So okay, so here we've got end users that are reporting that they're having issues with their Microsoft 365, high latency, issues across the network. So here, as we go into ThousandEyes, we can see here that within the monitoring stack, we are indeed monitoring from a URL perspective Microsoft and Microsoft Online, which is Office 365. And as you can see here within the monitoring frame, we're tracking the performance over time, and obviously that's a fully customizable view, and you can have a look at more granular or longer term. But this is a 24-hour view that we're taking a look at all of that sort of path and application sort of performance across that time to that target URL. And we can see in here we've got some spikes, we've got some trends that we're starting to sort of take a look at. So before we sort of go into and have a look at any of these particular spikes in activity, in the first instance, the network often gets the blame. So we're going to go down here and have a look at the traditional HTTP server. And here, when we can have a look at this, we can see that the network itself has got 100% availability. So the network isn't going to cause us any problems. And we can report that back as part of the network team that's not causing us any issues, which is great. So we can then from there take the demo a little bit further and go into a bit more granular detail around ThousandEyes. So at the next level, we can show the DNS is available and connection times are all good. So traditional send and receive of email again is flowing positively across the network. Down here in this table, again, using the stats that are being pulled out of ThousandEyes, we're monitoring 3 particular offices across the estate, all sort of again targeting and accessing to the Microsoft Online. And again, we can see that we've got no real problems or errors that are forming through this table, although we know we haven't fixed the end user experiences. So again, we're going to go into a little bit further detail and start to have a look at maybe some of these offices that might be themselves having particular issues. So let's go back into, I mentioned the spike that we saw on the original first page that we noted, and we can see here sort of around about sort of 6:30 to just before sort of 7 o'clock for about sort of 10 minutes, we've got a spike of activity that's coming across this particular path that we are monitoring out to that target of Office 365. We can drill down into the offices in a bit more detail, and here, as we dive in a little bit further in that particular window of time, we can see that the Cincinnati office is showing red. So we can pretty much instantly deduce that the Cincinnati, Cincinnati users will have during that time experienced a problem. So, but we need to try and understand what that problem is, where is the issue in a little bit more detail. So we can then go that step further in. And between this spike here again of that particular time that we're monitoring across the BGP route, across the monitoring stack, when we're looking at particular issues across the Microsoft interface, and I'm no software developer, I'm no code here, but we can see here that they're all Microsoft, they're all sort of Office aligned, and we can see down here we've got amount of traffic that's going through. We've got the duration from a millisecond in terms of the response times that we're getting, the end users are getting. Where are these long load times coming from? Well, we can see here instantly that actually it's on the Microsoft authentication server, or authentication network, sorry, should I say, that we're starting to see, have seen at this particular time, high latency across the network. High delays in terms of that authentication. So we've ruled out our network because we had a look at the HTTP servers. We've gone into particular areas and we can see that the Cincinnati offices were experiencing problems at that time. And again, at that particular time, we've delved into it. And on this particular application stack, we can see big delays in the Microsoft network authentication. That in itself gives us something, gives the network analysts, the network managers, something to go and report further back and further information back to Microsoft, so they can to support them to get to the root cause of their issue. And there you can see within a matter of minutes, because we've got the power of the stack, the power of the data that is being recorded, you can very quickly get into the root cause of where the issues are, whether they're on your network, and typically in this case off your network, so that that your network from an infrastructure perspective is delivering what it needs to. This problem that your end user are experiencing is sat within the Microsoft stack. Now, obviously, clearly other examples may point to other conclusions, and obviously all these areas need to be further sort of investigated, but it's really allowed you to look at outside of that walled garden. You can really then extend that visibility into the host of the SaaS solution to give you much clearer direction of where you might want to be going and troubleshooting further. So hopefully that example really just gives you an opportunity just to see the power of ThousandEyes and how you would effectively implement that on a day-to-day basis within your tool set, to provide that visibility, control, and ability to provide swift responses within a hybrid network, in particular when you're looking at off-net issues and troubleshooting. And that very much concludes our presentation for today. So thanks once again, Chris, for allowing us to share the video where you sort of took us through the business case and the reasons and justifications for looking at ThousandEyes. Here at Trust Systems, we obviously provide a managed services to our customers for networks, and for our role, it's about making sure that we can deliver a successful application and network performance to our customers, and we offer the ability to provide that consultation, design, build, and manage service across the corporate, the enterprise network infrastructure to support your hybrid working. And we'd love to have conversations with you about how we can support your transformation into a more internet-facing, digital-first network. So that was the presentation for SaaS. Why is it so important? As we mentioned, this is a on-demand series, so you can access this webinar as a content within our website, and you'll have access to the full stack of all our webinars that we've been producing in collaboration with Cisco, looking at network infrastructure, making sure that transition to a digital first approach and secure approach is enabled. So thank you once again. I've been Andrew Fox, and I'd love to engage with you further if any of this presentation has resonated. I look forward to seeing you on our next one. Thank you.